What is up, gentlemen? Welcome back to another episode on the channel. On today's episode, I'll be giving you guys the dummies or the beginner's guide to understanding men's perfume and the importance of men's perfume. We'll be breaking up this episode into 4 key components. Number 1, we'll look at the different types of perfumes on the market, all the way from your eau de cologne to all the way to your aftershave. And then we'll look at the different parts, right? The scent profile of a perfume. That way, the next time you're speaking with an acquaintance or a friend, you're actually knowledgeable about what you're talking about. We'll look at the top notes, the heart notes, and the base notes. And then we will look at how to actually apply perfume. And I'll give you guys my 2 to 3 key tips on how to approach perfume in your day-to-day life. When people think about perfume or cologne, right? If you're in the US, you're probably considering to call it cologne. If you're in Europe or this side of the world, you probably call it perfume. But cologne and perfume are actually 2 completely different things. The first step to understanding perfume is to understand what type of perfume you're referencing. Let's look at the different types. The first is going to be your eau de cologne, and all of this has to do with the level of concentration, the intensity of the materials used. Here, you're going to have around 2 to 5% of your overall note structure or your overall note profile mixed in with water and perfumer's alcohol. So it's pretty weak, and your cologne is going to be one of your weakest just after aftershave, or just after or before aftershave. Next up, we have our eau de toilette. So your eau de toilette is going to be your notes or your note profile at a 4 to 10% concentration mixed in with water and perfumer's alcohol. Next up, you have your eau de parfum. Your eau de parfum is going to be mixed around 8 to 15%, and then you have 15 to 30%, which is going to be your parfum. And then your last thing is going to be your aftershave, right? Your aftershave is going to be your weakest profile, and it's not going to be typically considered a perfume. It is just an aftershave. This is around 1 to 2%. Does this mean that a parfum is better than a eau de toilette? Well, it depends on what perfume you're talking about. I'll give you guys a very, very clear example. One of the most famous perfumes on the market is the Bleu de Chanel. Bleu de Chanel is widely regarded as being at its best in its eau de parfum structure as opposed to its parfum structure. Why? Well, it has to do with how the perfume or how the scent is actually projecting itself, how it's interpreted by others. A lot of people find the parfum to be a little bit overbearing, and the eau de parfum tends to be that perfect mix of subtlety but intensity. It gets across the scent profile beautifully, but it doesn't overdo it. I personally am a fan more of the parfum, but I tend to go for more stronger scents. Now let's actually look at what it is like when you're describing a perfume. What is the difference between a Bleu de Chanel and a Vanille Fatale, right, by Tom Ford? What is the difference between a Dior Sauvage and a Creed Aventus? All of this has to do with the notes that are mixed in, right? The different materials that are used to actually create the scent profile of the perfume. You have 3 key notes that you actually include to create your concoction. You have your top notes, which are your starting notes. You have your heart notes, which is essentially the body of the fragrance. And then you have your base notes, which is basically the ending of the fragrance. So you'll notice on really well-constructed fragrances that the scent profile, the scent experience changes over time. You might have a perfume that starts off very strong, very tangy, very zest, and then over time it becomes more subtle. It becomes more of a skin scent. So this has to do with your notes. The first note that you're going to have to allocate to is going to be your top note. This typically is going to be experienced for the first 10 to 15 minutes of a perfume or a scent's life cycle. These notes are essentially immediately what you smell, right? They tend to be very refreshing, very fresh, very tangy, very zesty, very sharp. And some of the well-known top notes are going to be lemon, orange, zest, bergamot. Next up, you have your heart notes. These are going to be the smells that you experience after your top notes have completely faded out. So after that 10 to 15 minute mark, you have approximately between 30 and 45 minutes of your heart notes. It's like the rainbow after the rain. It's what you get to experience after the show has finished. And here, typically, you tend to have a lot of florals. You have a lot of heavy bodied fragrances or scent profiles that just add a lot of character and depth to the fragrance. Last, but definitely not least, you have the star of the show, in my opinion, which is the base note. If you have your top note and your heart notes typically taking around between 1 to 2 hours, well, the remainder of the fragrance's life cycle is going to be in its base note. This is what you get to experience for around 5 to even 10 hours after you've applied the fragrance for the first time. Here, the fragrance matures, becomes more of a subtle skin scent. It takes on a life of its own, and it depends on the wearer. The well-known base notes are going to be vanilla, amber, sandalwood, and of course cedarwood. So what you tend to notice with your fragrances over time is that they become a little bit more warm. They have a little bit more subtlety to them. The fragrances I tend to gravitate towards the most all have good mixtures of vanilla, amber, and cedarwood. It has a longevity to it. Tobacco vanilla is one of the most well-known Tom Ford fragrances, and the longevity of that specific fragrance is phenomenal because it has a lot of vanilla in there. It's just a scent that wears well over time, and it even gets better over time. Now that we've actually described the life cycle of a specific perfume, how do you apply perfume? There's a lot of different opinions on this. Some people, they say spray it into the air and walk into it. Preposterous. Some people, they say spray it 30,000 billion times, right? Just drench yourself in perfume. Preposterous. Really? Here, you want to make sure that you're applying the perfume in a way that makes sense for the perfume. And of course, there are going to be general pulse points on the body that you want to hit. Predominantly for me, it's going to be behind the ears, on either side of the neck, center chest, behind, right? Right behind the neck. This provides a nice trail projection, and it just allows your perfume to be experienced from all areas. Really, I rarely put it on my wrists. I think that's a ridiculous statement. Who's going to be smelling you on the wrists? At the end of the day, perfume should be not only for yourself, but for others. You want to create an experience, and it's very important to be able to tailor the perfume to your specific scenario. Typically, when it comes to an office setting, I like to use a bit more of a fresh perfume, something that smells like you just got out of the shower. If I'm going for something at night, I might use a more seductive perfume, something a little bit more warm, chocolatey. If I'm going for a winter sort of profile, I'll use something that's warmer, something that's more projecting, more longer lasting. If I'm going for a summer sort of perfume, I'll use something with a lot more florals or fruity, something with lemon, something with bergamot, something that has a freshness to it. Well guys, that is it. That's been my core beginner's guide on understanding perfume. Please don't underestimate the importance of perfume, and of course, if you have the budget for it, create an extensive collection that gives you a good variety for the different scenarios that you'll find yourself in. Sure, start off with your base perfume, and for most men, I would recommend starting off with something like a Bleu de Chanel or a Dior Sauvage, something that is iconic, straightforward, and very easy to wear in a variety of different scenarios. Then as you begin to progress, try to look at maybe 2 or 3 key scenarios that you find yourself in on a day-to-day basis, and tailor your perfumes for each of these scenarios. That way, you have something a little bit different. The next time you go to see someone, you have a trick up your sleeve that is a nice representation of a mood that you're in or a vibe that you're trying to project. Have fun with it at the end of the day. This is all a way of creating your character and to give a little bit more texture and fun to life. So guys, if you enjoyed this episode, you want to see other episodes like this, where we're going to more of the finer details of life, well, let me know in the comments below which topics you're predominantly interested in. Guys, from the very bottom of my heart, thank you so much for tuning in to this episode, and we'll speak very, very soon.